Well, everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the 2013 Retina MacBook Pro and see how this particular MacBook holds up in 2025. Now, I will definitely tell you, for a lot of people out there, a MacBook like this probably is not worth buying. This is a MacBook that came out years and years ago, and within a Mac like this, you're definitely going to be kind of hitting a ceiling of the capability, the power, and just the stuff that you can do inside of this type of Mac. When these Macs first came out like 12 years ago, they were very solid, but nowadays they're just not really worth buying in most capacities, but there might still be some capabilities, some things you can do within these types of Macs. First of all, if you are in the market and you are looking for a Mac, links are down in the description for some of the best MacBooks that I would highly recommend every single person out there to go ahead and buy. So if you're in the market, you want to pick those up, links are down in the description. You can get them from there and you can help support the channel at the exact same time. Now, starting off with the outside of these particular MacBooks, you have to remember that these MacBooks, came out in 2013. So now that they're approaching 12 years old, like I said, you're definitely going to be able to tell that this is an older MacBook, but it doesn't feel like a cheap Mac. These MacBooks still have some capability when it comes down to their design, because they still feel like a very expensive premium type of Mac when it comes down to it. And that is something that I actually love a lot about these types of devices. So from that side, I think that is a really, really important thing to keep in mind there from that particular perspective. Now, one thing to keep in mind here too is that with something like, these 2013 MacBooks, you're getting your Apple logo on the front. You're essentially getting standard type of layout on the outside too. There's not anything else super crazy going on here. You are still maintaining things like the port selection and things like that. And within the ports and the size, this thing came out in two different sizes, a 13-inch size and then a 15-inch size basically. So that was also something nice to have too, because you're still getting like a pretty good type of layout inside of this type of MacBook from that particular perspective. Now, within a MacBook like this, you're going to have to remember that this type of device is essentially going to be able to be kind of giving you a good type of layout when it does kind of come down to its standard life cycle. The display itself is still pretty nice. The build quality of this thing still looks pretty good. So I will tell you, in my personal opinion, this type of Mac still looks pretty good when it comes down to that particular side. Now, with that being said, I still feel like if you are getting this type of MacBook, the ports are still actually pretty decent. So you have to remember, like I said, if you are getting a MacBook like this type of MacBook does give you a pretty good experience from that particular side. And if you are going to be getting a MacBook, this thing is definitely going to be feeling pretty good. So I feel like from that particular perspective, that is kind of an important thing to keep in mind here. The port selection, though, in and of itself, it's going to be giving you basically two Thunderbolt 2 ports, two USB 3 ports, an HDMI port, and then an SD card slot with that MagSafe 2 charger. So that right there as well is something that is really nice too. So once again, being able to go through and get that type of capability inside of this Mac, I do think in and of itself, it is a very nice thing to basically be able to get. So you are still getting a fairly good quality, fairly premium feeling Mac inside of this type of device too. So the fact that it feels premium, you're getting these ports is also very nice. Now, because also it is going to be giving you this, cheaper, older type of lifestyle, you have to remember that this type of Mac is definitely going to be very, very affordable. It's going to be one of the most affordable types of Macs you can buy because it's very, very old. There wasn't anything super unique about this Mac when it first came out. So that is also another important thing to keep in mind here too, because this type of product was basically coming out at an interesting time where, the Mac before this was bringing a lot of stuff to the table. This type of Mac, on the other hand, was essentially not really giving you anything super unique. It was an improvement to the 2012 Retina MacBook Pro, but this was not the first Retina MacBook Pro that came out. So I would tell you from that side too, that is kind of an important thing to keep in mind here, because you're still able to go through and get like a good quality premium feeling Mac from that side, and you're still able to get like a good feeling Mac from that particular perspective. So I will tell you from that side too, I think that's another really nice thing to keep in mind here. If you're going to go through and pick up a Mac, that also is like another nice thing. And because of its display, when you open it up, you're getting that full-size keyboard, that trackpad, and that 13-inch or 14-inch display. And that right there, I think, is another really nice thing to be able to go through and pick up for these types of Macs, because you're able to go through and still get like a very good premium type of Mac inside of this type of device. And I feel like if you are going to go through and get a Mac, I mean, the display on this thing itself is a very nice type of display. And like I said, for one, I'm a very big fan of this type of device when it comes down to it. However, when it comes, and that's only for the display, I'm a big fan of it when it comes down to its display. Otherwise though, this type of Mac really would not be a type of device I don't think I would recommend a vast majority of people to go ahead and pick up. The main reason for this is because its software is already outdated. The software is pretty much no longer getting any more software updates, and that is kind of the biggest problem you'll end up experiencing here when you're going to go through and pick up really any of these types of products. The last thing you want to do is go ahead and get a device where it's already kind of outdated with software, and that is essentially what's going on when you're going to go through and pick up any of these types of products. So you're going to be getting a device on here that is definitely going to be showing its age, and that right there is going to be a problem. Because you probably don't want to go through and just pick up a Mac or pick up a product if it's already going to be outdated with software. And that is kind of what's going on here for the most part. So again, maybe it's not the biggest deal in the world, but that is going to be a big problem for me to recommend to people. Also, the performance inside of this Mac is also not really going to be that great. So if you're talking about the performance of an everyday type of 2013 MacBook, this thing really is not going to be that great either. And you're definitely going to be running into some problems here when it does kind of come down to the capability and the overall performance of these Macs. Because they basically are maxed out at 8 gigabytes of RAM. They're giving you like the Intel Core i5. So for today's applications and today's standards, it's just not really going to be that great of a performing Mac. So like I said before, there are substantially way better performing Macs than this one. And the last thing I would want to do is recommend you to go ahead and buy a Mac if it's already going to be outdated with software. And that is kind of what's going on here for the most part. On top of that, if that wasn't bad enough, the battery life inside of these Macs too really aren't going to be that great anymore either. You know, if you're going to go through and get a 2013 MacBook Pro, you're going to have to remember that you're also going to be getting a 12-year-old battery inside of it. And because of that, that's also going to be another big issue because you probably don't want to just go through and buy these types of products if they're already going to be somewhat outdated with software, and if the performance is just not going to be that great either. And that is kind of what's going on here when you're going through and buying these types of products, right? And it's not to say that this is a bad device or this is just not going to be a good phone. No, this was still a good MacBook when it first came out, but that's what happens when devices become 12 years old. Right? When they become 12-year-old, like it just ends up becoming a very, very weird performing device, and it just doesn't end up becoming worth it anymore because it's just outdated. So to kind of sum it up, what I definitely will tell you is that these types of products, you know, when you look at something like a 2013 MacBook Pro, these things probably aren't worth buying in a majority of ways that you can probably think about. There isn't really any way that I would kind of recommend buying something like this type of MacBook anymore because it's just not really worth buying. The performance isn't great, the capability isn't good anymore, and there's just significantly more reasons to avoid this type of Mac than to buy it. I think if you're going to go through, I would recommend buying like any of the M1 models. The M1 model MacBooks have just changed everyone's opinion on Macs, and they become so much better. And those ones make a lot more sense for people to go and buy rather than this one. So I would recommend buying those M1 models. These models just don't really make that much sense anymore. And I think a majority of people probably see it that way now as well. So from that side, that kind of covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that will mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.